About though the mercy, but the mercy is not being shown or realized by some radical Muslims, radical Islamic groups, for example, that are creating this problem. I'm wondering what sort of humor, what sort of jokes you use to criticize them in a way. Can you give us some examples?
Well, I don't make fun of terrorists because I don't want to get killed. I'm just kidding.
I think you should.
You know, the fact of the matter is, I mean, Todd, this is a very, as much as I'm here pointing out that we have to be careful about, you know, these constructs of terrorism and, you know, everything else, you know, when the government does it in the name of promoting peace in the Middle East or toppling Saddam or whatever, then somehow it's anything but. The reality is, and by the way, Bill Clinton, right after 9/11, said a very profound thing. He said, let us never forget the greatest act of terrorism committed on American soil was the treatment of the Native Americans. That's a Bill Clinton quote. Right after 9/11, he said that in this country. So my hat's off to him because I think he spoke the truth. We have to also recognize, as much as that is true, as I said earlier, there is this problem of radical Islamist ideology. And it is a problem, it is a cancer in the Muslim world, and it is a cancer in our religion. And as I said, Muslims have the biggest responsibility, more than anybody else, to root out this problem, to denounce it, to recognize it for what it is, which is that it is a cancer. And by the way, this type of radical, you know, idea, when they attack America or they hate America, it's not like they just hate America. They hate me, they hate you, they hate everybody who doesn't agree with them. You know, this fringe has been around for a long time. You know, even from the early days of Islam, there was a very radical group that emerged that was condemning all the other Muslims, and they're called the Khawarij. And I would argue that a lot of these contemporary groups are just drawing their inspiration from that same radical, crazy, lunatic fringe. And so again, just as Muslims historically have refuted them, and the Muslim mainstay scholarship has denounced them and exposed their lies and shown them to not be connected to our tradition, we have to do that for our time in a modern, contemporary way. And Muslims, unfortunately, have not been rising to that challenge, and that's part of the reason why there's still so much confusion regarding the difference between a radical terrorist, extremist, and everybody else.
Hi, I'm Muwaffa Tayyib, and I'm from the minority of Muslims who are Arabs. I would like to ask you, how do you compare your group, Allah Made Me Funny, with the Axis of Evil comedian group, for example? Thanks.
The honest answer is I don't. I don't bother to compare our work. I personally believe, as I said earlier, that we just don't have enough people entering media and entertainment. And so I think that what the brothers at Axis of Evil are doing is great, and we continue to wish them well. And actually, I pray for their success. I've actually literally made dua. I've prayed to God for the success of Axis of Evil, because for those who don't know, you know, it's a group of Middle Eastern comedians, and they, you know, have a couple of Arabs on their tour. They've got a brother who's Iranian, and they, of course, are, you know, achieving greater and greater levels of success. And I honestly believe whatever is good for them is good for us, because you know, we're very much in a symbiotic relationship right now, given that the market and the entertainment industry needs more voices to emerge from these communities. So I don't really compare us. I mean, I guess objectively speaking, they are certainly playing more of the Middle Eastern, you know, cultural angle, and in their own private and personal lives. I know them, all of them personally, and they have a much more secular, you know, worldview. Whereas the comedians on Allah Made Me Funny are sort of playing up more of the Muslim angle, if you will. So there is that qualitative difference. But beyond that, you know, we're brothers on a very similar path, and we just hope that the audiences are continuing to respond, because I think their work is very important. And I actually have to wear multiple hats, because when I'm on stage telling jokes, I'm a comedian, but we also are, you know, business people, we're producers. We just made a movie which is coming out later this year, which is based on the Allah Made Me Funny tour, called Allah Made Me Funny Live in Concert. And so, you know, looking at the success that Axis of Evil has gotten, we're certainly hoping that we can replicate and continue to grow on that team success.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, please. Yes.
Hi, my name is Robin Sokolov, and I'm involved in a lot of local bridge building between the Jewish community and the Muslim community. And I was wondering if you could speak about your experiences growing up in a largely Jewish community, and also if you have any advice as we try to break down stereotypes and build bridges.
How did you know I grew up in a largely... Do you work for the CIA? Oh, okay. I thought maybe you got a CIA file on me. Yeah, thank you, Rabbi. I was just performing last night, actually, in New Jersey with a rabbi stand-up comedian called Bob Alper. He and I do a show together called One Muslim, One Jew, One Stage, Two Very Funny Guys. You know, growing up in Skokie, Illinois, which is a predominantly Jewish suburb of Chicago, I often have to remind people that I talk to my Jewish friends now that I grew up with, and I tell them, I turn out to be more Jewish than half you guys, because I got the beard going, I keep strictly kosher, and I went to law school.
That's right. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Deniz Özkan and I'm Turkish. Actually, I'd like to know who is the best audience? Can you say that the Muslims or Christians or Jews gets the jokes most, or Americans or Europeans or Turkish? Who laughs most?
Definitely Turkish.
Thank you. Teşekkürler.
The best audience. You know, it's funny because audiences are, you know, Jerry Seinfeld is one of my inspirations. He says that people often talk about stand-up as a monologue. You know, you stand on stage, you do a monologue. And he said, actually, comedy stand-up is a dialogue. And so, you know, the comedian's role is to tell jokes, and the audience's role is to laugh, to respond. And he said a very profound thing. He said, laughter contains thought. Because if you notice, you know, every joke that I did that you laughed at, people laugh differently. And that means you're responding to the joke differently. It means something different to somebody. I do a joke where I talk about how, you know, I said, I walk down the street, I get dirty looks for being a Muslim. I just want to stop people and tell them, look, I'm a Muslim, but I'm an American Muslim. That's right, I consider myself a very patriotic American Muslim, which means I would die for this country by blowing myself up. See, everybody's laughing for a different reason. Because, and this is a very complicated joke, actually, because what's the butt of the joke? Am I making fun of Muslim suicide bombers? Am I making fun of, you know, people who think that people like me are suicide bombers? And so, you know, what I've come to realize is that every joke, and this is why we opened with this comment, you know, comedy is a subtle art form. It's a subtle form of communication. So people will understand a joke differently, and as a result, you know, it's very tough to gauge who's the best audience. Objectively, there's no such thing in my mind. The best audience to me is one who laughs a lot. And if they clap every once in a while, even better. Oh, thank you.
But really, how does your show, jokes, perceived by the Muslim audience? I wonder about that. Or do you make a difference in your routine in the show?
Not really, man. I mean, comedy is comedy, funny is funny, and you know, ultimately, a lot of what we talk about, Allah Made Me Funny prides itself on being a community project. And when we say that, we mean that we're talking about core values, we're talking about universal themes, you know, we're talking about stuff that is very relatable to anybody. And so if you can get a joke, you can understand Allah Made Me Funny. And as a result, we have found that since we began this tour about 4 years ago, we have been able to take it to about a dozen countries on 5 continents. I mean, it has already wildly exceeded our expectations, alhamdulillah, all thanks to God. And we're just really blessed and fortunate to be able to perform all over the world and to have people get the jokes. And what we have found now in America is that the audience has begun to diversify. So whereas in the beginning it was much more of a Muslim audience that was interested in coming and hearing, you know, Muslim jokes, suddenly you're finding that more and more people who are not Muslims, mainstream Americans from all walks of life, all religious backgrounds, all ages, all races, are turning up for the show, partly because they're curious, you know, what is this thing all about? Allah Made Me Funny, and partly because they're getting the word on the street that it's a funny show. And we pride ourselves in the fact that we're a full-time working, you know, professional stand-up comedian, stand-up comedy tour, and as a result, people often come thinking it's going to be, you know, they're like, oh, Muslim comedy, it's going to be like Christian comedy. No offense. But, you know, generally, you know, people have the stereotype that Christian comedy is not that funny. But when they come to our show, they're like, wow, it's actually a quality, funny comedy show, and hopefully that word is spreading on the street.
Okay.